Hello and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by
the camp counselor that really just wants to be your dad. That is Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are also he, him.
This week, as we mentioned, we're doing Mockingbird Lane, the failed pilot.
1313 Mockingbird Lane.
Yeah, so this was... The Bryans teamed up, so you got Bryan Fuller writing and Bryan Singer directing, and you know this aired I think like on Halloween when it originally came out. This is the first time I've watched this since it like aired on TV live.
Yeah.
We're
going to talk about the Bryans later, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so Bryan Fuller is awesome. Like he's really really smart. Like I don't know if you catch any interviews with him, he's like got a really like smart critical mind, like the way he thinks about the stuff he's writing and the way that he thinks about the stuff that he enjoys. Yeah, he's just a fascinating dude. I think some people probably have found us through the Kingcast. He's a regular guest there, and like his episodes are always like so insightful.
Right.
On the other hand, Bryan Singer sucks.
Yeah. That's a fair assumption.
So yeah, he's if you don't know, he's got pretty bad track record with underage boys, and not a great dude.
The guy has majored in essay to a degree, which
yeah, I'd imagine at this point, people weren't aware of that situation, or else he wouldn't have been. I mean, I think he's done stuff since, but I doubt you would have seen Bryan Fuller working with him at this point had that been public knowledge.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was like. So the 1313 Mockingbird Lane came out after X-Men First Class, and of course, Fox being Fox, they're like, hey, let's bring him back for all of the X-Men movies that we're doing from now on, pretty much. Okay?
Yeah.
Oof. Now, I will say, it upsets me greatly that he filmed a movie that I liked a couple movies aside from the X-Men movies, which was The Taking of Deborah Logan and Bohemian Rhapsody. So.
And he also did, I think one of the Apt Pupil was the one where like he did like some shit happened on set that was like the
that scans.
Yeah. So yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
But thankfully, like we don't have to like actually interact with him in the movie. He's just there in the background, unfortunately,
directing things, probably hurting people. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so this movie, like it's like an hour long, so it's like a TV movie, I guess, since it's just a pilot.
Well, but not only that, this is basically loaded with stars. Like we talked last week that there were a lot of kind of like that person or this this person. No, we've got big names for the most part. I don't know if Jerry O'Connell is such a big name now, but he plays sexy Herman Munster. I refuse to believe he's actually Herman Munster. We have Portia de Rossi, which is, can you say more sexy version of Lily? I don't really think that's a different type of sexy than Lily.
Oh yeah. She's a nice addition, I'll say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Portia de Rossi, who's like probably most known as like
Ellen's wife. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Ellen's wife or Lindsay from Arrested Development.
Yeah.
And then Eddie Izzard as Grandpa.
Right.
Who like is mostly mostly did stand up, but acts in some things.
Listen, I feel that this role was inspired by his turn as the henchman to Casanova Frankenstein. Do you know Mystery Men?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have Charity Wakefield as Marilyn. She's not really a big name, but she is still out there acting. I think one of her last movies was in 2020. And then Mason Cook, who plays Eddie, not Izzard, just Eddie Munster, was recently in Plan B?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about this. I saw this. I remember there being something in the news about this. Apparently, recently, Eddie Izzard announced that they're using she/her pronouns. So, obviously, was not the case at the time, and that's going to be a little confusing to keep track of. But still, Eddie Izzard, no like name change, but that's my understanding. Is the most recent things I've seen. That she, her. So we'll try to keep that in mind.
I feel like Eddie Izzard defies gender.
Yeah, I mean, like even like way back in the day, it was always like stand up in drag and stuff. Like it's very gender fluid kind of stuff going on. Like before that was at all acceptable. So Good for Eddie Izzard for doing that all these years.
Yeah.
Okay, but so yeah, we start out, we get the Munsters theme, which is, always nice to, and it's like a more orchestral kind of version of it.
Right, but we're zooming in on a campground now.
Yeah, so this is very unfamiliar territory. We're not at we're not on Mockingbird Lane. And we've got like a scout leader who is talking to all the campers. And he's kind of like chastising them because somebody ate all the snacks.
Okay, first off, Scoutmaster, why weren't you looking after the snacks? That was your job.
Yeah.
You failed these kids.
But he's being very diplomatic. He's like, somebody ate the snacks, and now we're all gonna have,
Yeah.
But then like one kid is like, we all know it was this guy. Like
right. They're fat shaming Wallace.
Like, yeah, there's some fat phobia stuff there, which is like it's kids. They're gonna be shitty to each other.
Yeah.
And the he's like, I swear it wasn't me. It was a baby bear. And they're like, yeah, right. And like, I've got a picture of you eating a Snickers or something in the weeds.
It's like
and
a box.
It wasn't me.
A box of cereal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But so like that kind of goes back and forth, and like they're kind of like snipping at each other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a giant beast appears. So maybe that kid was right.
One
maybe
kid
there
just
was a
gets
baby bear.
One kid just gets snatched. I think it's the one that's talking mad shit. He just gets snatched. I'm like, oh, this is killing kids. Okay, that's where we are with this.
Yeah, and so at first it's just like a ominous black figure that you can't quite tell what it is.
It looks like a bear because the CGI is that bad.
Yeah, but then we finally get like a silhouette where like, yep, it's a werewolf howling at the moon, and like we could definitely tell. And you see like it is a great shot where you get like silhouettes of all the campers running away, and then you see the wolf like stand up on its hind legs and howl at the moon and everything.
Let's talk about the kid in the sleeping bag that gets thrown against the tree, and like just stuffing flies out. I'm like, they killed a kid. They're killing kids in the show. But when the kid hits the ground, he's like, ow, and it's like, oh, this is for gags. Okay, well, damn, you had my hopes up.
Yeah, the sleeping bag thing definitely made me think of like Jason Voorhees too, like the famous sleeping bag kill.
Yeah, but as you said, when they all go running around, it's like, oh, they're all fine. They've just been scratched up. And then, of course, we get this great shot of all the kids and the counselor in a car huddled together. They're like, hey, where's Eddie? Eddie Munster. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. And so then we see like the camera kind of like snakes through the campsite, and it's just everything's wrecked. There's just debris everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of pans up to like you just see some brush at the edge of the clearing, and then a kid pops up, and he, you just see him from like the waist up, and he appears to be naked, or at least has no shirt on, and he's like looking kind of confused and scared, like what's happening.
This is the most nudist Munsters, I would have to say.
Yeah, there is a lot of nudity. There's no nudity, but there's a lot of implied nudity in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, so obviously we know that kid's Eddie, right? But it cuts from that to a for sale sign for 1312 Mockingbird Lane.
Yeah, we got a realtor pulling up with a very attractive young woman, blonde hair. That's Marilyn. We know that's Marilyn. Everyone, you see her and you're like, that's Marilyn.
Yeah.
But she's looking for a home for her family, and it's a nice house. It's a nice house, but it's not their kind of nice house, And
Marilyn in this is there's a lot of like kind of weird inconsistencies in this that are kind of hard to put your finger on, like what is this Munsters family's deal? Like they're not like the Munsters we've seen before. Because like in the past, like Marilyn's always been like she's the normie, she's like boring, she looks regular.
Yeah.
But here, like, there's some darkness to Marilyn. Like, she's a pretty blonde who looks vaguely like Marilyn Monroe, because that's what Marilyn has to be. But, like, as the realtor's like, he's like, this gets lots of sun, and she's like, not a feature we're looking for. Like, she's really like deadpan and like, no, we don't want that kind of shit. Like, and then she looks across the street and sees this like rundown, dilapidated mansion. And she's like, no. What about that? Is that for sale?
No.
That sounds more like our speed.
You don't want that. That's the home of a notorious serial killer, man. They found bodies in the walls. And like you said, this Marilyn is the kind of Marilyn who she will stab you. I don't believe any other Marilyn would cause harm to another human being. This Marilyn would kill you.
Oh, yeah.
But she's like, this is perfect. That's great. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, and he's like, well, maybe, it's not really for sale. Maybe once they demolish it, we could sell you the land. And she's like, no, we want the house. And he's like, but it needs to be cleansed. And she's like, we'd prefer pre-cleansed.
Right.
And he's like, but like, seriously, like there might still be dead homeless people in the wall.
That's what we're looking for.
And she's like, it sounds like they found a home after all.
Right, yeah.
Then it pretty much just cuts to, like, they've clearly gotten the house and everything. They're kind of getting ready to move in. And we see...
a silhouette of Herman.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, the Frankenstein we're used to seeing. You got a really square, flat-top head, kind of bolts sticking out of the neck and everything. Mm-hmm. But then, as this Herman steps forward, it turns out that's actually just a lantern behind him that's square-shaped. And Herman just looks like a regular dude.
Well, it's stupid, sexy Jerry O'Connell, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has noticeable stitches around his neck and wrists, but otherwise, yeah, he's just Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah. But this one actually seems... Okay, so I take issue with this version of Herman. Not necessarily Jerry O'Connell, but... So obviously he's conventionally attractive, right? We can agree on that? Okay. Yeah. But also, like, this version of Herman is too fucking smart. Okay?
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, he's definitely, he's got like the good heart that I feel like is the central characteristic of Herman.
Yes.
But yeah, he does seem a little bit more clever. Herman's the big kid. Like you want Herman's lovable because he's the big kid.
Right. And not only that, but he's extreme. This version's extremely articulate. I feel like Herman, like, don't get me wrong, he's not a big oaf. We know that. But also, I don't feel that Herman would use what are coined as $3 words when he could just say it straight to you. I feel that's the thing about Herman. He's straightforward. He's honest. He doesn't hide things about baby bear attacks.
Yeah, and that we'll get into that here really quickly, but like that's one of the major issues I have with this version. And you know, I mean, like I think that like Herman not looking like a Frankenstein monster is like definitely a choice where they're trying to ground this in reality. But it's the Munsters. Like just let him be Frankenstein. Okay. And once you see like what Grandpa gets up to in a little bit,
yeah, that's no reality. Yeah, there's no reality. False.
Yeah.
All right, but yeah, so once again we have stupid, sexy Herman talking with Eddie, and he's like, yeah, since the baby bear attack, you know, we had to move away. There are reasons we, you know, didn't want people to associate you with that, blah, blah, blah. Well, he doesn't tell him that. He basically is like, yeah, since the baby bear attack, we just had to move away. And I think what Eddie says, well, we didn't get to say goodbye, and Herman is like, well, leaving is a form of saying goodbye, right?
Yeah. Obviously, they're hiding Eddie being a werewolf from him, which seems so counterintuitive to like the way that the Munsters are. But it's also like they're hiding it, but like
not well.
Like, yeah, because like Eddie is like, wait, did Grandpa eat somebody again? Is that why we moved?
Right.
And he's like, no, not Grandpa.
Right. And he already knows his grandpa's basically a Dracula.
Yeah. So it's strange to be like aware of that and like yeah. I think around that, like, in, like, you know, like you said, Marilyn being Marilyn in this, she's like walking around looking at how just like creepy and nasty the house is, and she's like, it smells like home. It's just like, right. Yeah, Marilyn, like she is like, she's one of those like goths that's like goth on the inside, but like, you know, keeping it hidden.
No, 100%. She heard the story about the serial killer that had the bodies in the home, and she's like, what was this count? I can do better.
Yeah. And so, yeah, they're kind of touring the house. Eddie leans on like a statue of a vulture, and like the head bends down, which raises up the famous like hidden passage under the stairs.
Yeah, that leads. We know that's going to eventually lead to the lab or spot or both one day.
Yes, exactly. So Eddie's kind of continuing this conversation with Herman, and he says something about like, Grandpa says I have a condition. Is it the same kind of condition that Marilyn has, or what kind of condition is it? And you know, Herman's kind of like, no, you get your condition from me. And he's like, which part? And he like, you know, lets Eddie listen to his heart, and he's like, that, you know, the heart, that's how I know I'm me. Like that's my central part, I guess.
Which that leads to another question. So he knows his father is basically a Frankenstein. His grandpa's a Dracula. His mom's also kind of a Dracula. Why hide this from him?
Yeah, he does in this conversation also say that he wants to be normal like Marilyn. So maybe they're just hiding it because they feel like he doesn't want that. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. He is what he is, and if you're hiding it from him, it's almost like a reverse thing of the way that Marilyn gets treated a lot of the time, where it's like you're not letting Eddie. You know, you need to teach Eddie to accept who he is because that's what he is. Like you can't hide it forever. Eventually, he's going to find out he's a werewolf, and if you treat that as like something to hide from him, then that just is going to make him ashamed of it all the more.
Right, exactly. But then, of course, we have some movers coming in, the Perez Company, which I do appreciate their use of Spanish. I respect that. I like it. They literally start talking about ice cream. Well, they think the boxes are full of ice cream, or at least one of them do, because they're cold.
It's cold?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like 2 big crates, so, you know what's coming. And they think, it sounds like something's moving in one of them, which causes them to drop it, and it breaks open on the side.
Shit ton of rats!
Yeah, just thousands of rats just come pouring out of it, and they're just like, fuck this. So they jump in the car, or in the delivery truck, and speed away.
Turns out they're not just rats, they're grandpa rats. Because they form a grandpa who's naked.
Yeah, which is that it looks super cool. Like they just swarm into the shape of Grandpa and then slowly turn into him.
You know what I disliked about Eddie Izzard in this?
What's that?
No, I'm actually asking you to tell me, because I fucking love him in every scene he's in this thing.
Yeah, he's Eddie.
They. She. They.
Yeah, she is. I mean, like, just choose the scenery, like. Eddie Izzard just being, and it's not like Al Lewis. It's a very, very different Grandpa, but Grandpa is definitely one of the best parts of this.
Al Lewis Grandpa would nip you and maybe take a little blood. This one will fucking murder you. Like, I feel like that's what we should just say about all of the monsters in this one. Just all of them.
Yeah. They all are perfectly okay hurting people in this one.
Yep.
And Grandpa especially. Like, Grandpa's excited about murdering people.
Right.
If Grandpa had like a little calendar, like, it would be like plans. Like, tomorrow I'm gonna go down the street. I'm gonna find something. Like, Grandpa's ready to do some murders.
Yep. But we also get some mist, some sexy mist.
Yeah. Yeah, mist that's kind of like, very sensually forming Lily, who is also naked. But so naked Grandpa gets Marilyn, who comes out with a robe and is like, you got to cover up. What would the neighbors think? And it's a very like Gary Oldham Dracula robe. It's like red, kind of high collared and stuff.
Yeah. That way the blood doesn't stain it.
But Lily doesn't need any help from anyone else, because she just like summons forth spiders from everywhere, and they just crawl all over her body and weave a spider web dress that is just so good. Like, as you said, this is a very sexy Lily, and
right.
I mean, this scene it's nice.
Is this also the gayest version of the Munsters?
Yeah, it feels like. I mean, and again, I think both of the Bryans are gay, so like, yeah,
makes
there's
sense.
Definitely some queer action going on in this.
Yep, I'll buy it. All right.
So now they're all, and this spiderweb dress that Lily's in is it resembles like the Bride of Frankenstein, like the gauze wraps that she's in. So Herman comes out and he's like, "Welcome home, Lily."
And what does a couple do once they've gotten into their new home? Well, they have sex in it.
Yeah, they got to christen the new bedroom. So, and this like it pretty much like he welcomes Lily home, and then it just cuts to like Lily kind of like falling back in like a very like post-coital sigh, and then you see Herman falling back at the same, but then we see that they're not next to each other. Lily's on the ceiling and Herman's in bed, and they're like looking down, looking at each other.
Right. Now another thing that I thought was interesting was this version of Herman. You can obviously see that he's been stitched together. His chest shows that. He also has a zipper in his chest.
Yeah, they just got like an easy access port so they can get to the heart.
Which, that'll become a thing later. But that's a really cool shot. Her on the ceiling, him on the bed.
Yeah, it looks so good. And then like they're kind of talking a little bit, and then Lily suddenly just like turns into fog again and just like sensually flows down up against Herman and turns back into him, just kind of like, so they're like cuddled up next to each other. Yeah, and they have a little bit of pillow talk. But Lily is worried that maybe she should have breastfed Eddie. Yeah, so this conversation was really strange because it felt like I couldn't quite pin down what everybody wanted. Like,
right.
She's nervous about Eddie and that she thinks she's done a bad job raising him up to this point. But they both seem adamant that they don't want to tell Eddie yet. So I guess the thing is she thinks if she had breastfed Eddie, he would be more happy about being a monster and they wouldn't have to hide it. Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard.
So here's my read. What I got from the conversation is that she wished she had felt closer to him so that she would have been able to tell him feel more comfortable telling him, hey, you're like this. But instead, she actually wanted to eat him.
Yeah. And she, like, they talk a little bit about, like, how, like, Marilyn's mom almost ate her and didn't, and maybe she should have.
It's almost implied that Marilyn killed her mom, or somebody did, maybe Grandpa.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely vibe with Marilyn, like, that her family didn't accept her, so she killed them and then moved in with the other Munsters.
Right.
But yeah, regardless, this feels like, it's a dark comedy. There's definitely comedy to it, but this feels like kind of like a sitcom setup kind of thing where, like, people aren't sharing all of the information that they have, and that's causing some, like, tension between the family.
Yeah. But we also they have this really fucking weird line. Okay, and this is a thing that actually irks me. Lily's like, Herman, you love too hard. You know, your heart can't take it. You love so much. And it's like, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, and like they even, like, the reason she says that is because she's like got her head on his chest and he's worrying about Eddie, and we see like an inside shot of Herman's heart that's all like stitched up and a little staple pops out of it. Yeah. And so, yeah, she's like, if you love too hard, it's going to break your heart.
Which, that's dumb. That's opposite, anti-Herman.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not what we want out of Herman. We want Herman to love just completely. Like, that is Herman.
Right.
And so then we cut to the next morning at breakfast. Eddie is eating like some kind of Frankenstein-themed cereal that's got the more traditional Frankenstein on the box. I think it's called Frankenfruits. It was hard. You can see the Franken part, but you can't read the rest. And like when it's closer on the screen. And yeah, I had trouble reading it. But anyway,
I guess they couldn't get the rights to Frankenberry.
Yeah. And Eddie is wearing his scout uniform. And Grandpa is like, why are you wearing that uniform?
We don't do uniforms here.
Yeah, and Eddie's like, I need that structure. And Lily's like, we all have our own form of uniform. And if Eddie needs structure, that's, this is the uniform he needs. That's fine.
I mean, she ain't wrong.
And then, like, Eddie's definitely picking up that some shit's going on that the family's not telling him. And he, like, just, like, outright says, like, is there something wrong with me? And Grandpa's like, I don't want to hear that kind of shame from you. Like, the only person in this family who should be ashamed is Marilyn.
But she carries it beautifully. Yeah. Which, all right, that's very Grandpa. All right, that's old school Grandpa.
Yeah, and so, obviously that's, Marilyn is going to be the odd one out. But, like, there does seem to be something here where it's like, we've accepted Marilyn as, like, the freak of the family. We appreciate what she has. Like, so, yeah, she should be ashamed, but, like, we like that she should be ashamed, like. So,
no, she's definitely, her and Grandpa have done some murders together.
Yeah.
That's their favorite. Some grandpas take their kid fishing, some, do whatever. Nope, they go out on murders.
Yeah. And then we get this kind of extended metaphor conversation where, like, they're talking about hair growing in unexpected places, and it's like puberty, but also werewolfism. And Eddie thinks they're just talking about puberty, and the rest of the family's trying to nudge him into thinking that they're talking about werewolfism, and he's not catching it.
No, not yet. But it's time for Eddie to go hop on the bus. It's school time.
Yeah, and so Herman walks him out to the bus, and, he's like, we'll talk about this more later. And Eddie's like, I know you're lying to me, and then gets on the bus. Like,
by the way,
he is mad.
Did you catch the song that started playing, I Need a New Heart?
The Magnetic Field song, and it's so good, because then the song starts, and then, like, as the bus drives off, you see another staple pop off of Herman's heart, and then, like, it cuts to just like later on, Eddie is like up on the roof.
Well, no, Herman's heart like busts open, and he does a face plant on the stairs.
Yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, he like falls, and then like we see Eddie up on the roof, and there's like a storm, and he's like running wires down the chimney.
Right, they're gonna do some mad science.
Yeah. So you got Grandpa in there with all kinds of science gear behind him. No science wheels, but there's a lot of sparking stuff going on. He's, reviving Herman, of course. Yeah. And like, as he's doing it, like, you just hear the Apple computer startup chime.
Right. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Grandpa has an iPad. Just...
Yeah, so he boots up Herman somehow, and we see Herman's, like, zippered chest flap is open now, and Grandpa's like, so your heart broke, you're too sentimental, but I've got a new mechanical heart.
No, Herman doesn't want that mechanical heart. He wants his old heart. That's the last original piece of him.
Yeah, and so this feels very Herman, where he's like, he is being sentimental, and he's like, yeah, I'm sure, you could put that make, steampunk heart in me and I'd be good for, indefinitely, but like I want to keep this. I'm going to fight to keep this heart. But Grandpa is not really liking that, but he's like, fine, whatever, it's your body. So
but he does also make a mention that, listen, you weren't a monster until I made you a monster. So maybe Grandpa killed Herman and then put him back together for Lily.
Yeah, it seems like, because he's like, while he's like putting the old heart back in, like they're talking about Eddie, and Grandpa's like, I've raised werewolves before.
Yeah, because of Leslie, my son.
Yeah, and he's like, you're not doing a good job. Like, you need to be there for Eddie and like help him accept that he's a werewolf. So like, good advice here.
But he's like, Herman has some counters to that. He's like, well, you didn't raise Leslie. A bunch of nannies raised Leslie. And then they got eaten by Leslie. And then, of course, Grandpa's like, what do you think I hired him for? That's the whole point.
Yeah. So, then that's where Grandpa's like, Eddie was born a monster and you were made into one. So, like, he's more of a member of the family than you are. And you need to tell him about what his place in the family is soon, because he's going to figure it out and your heart's not going to last much longer.
Right.
So then we get a scene of, it's like later, I think that this all happens at night, and so now it's like the next day, you got Grandpa and Marilyn, they're walking outside, kind of surveying the neighborhood, and Grandpa's like, I really miss when we lived further away from the villages and had a moat.
I like what Marilyn says, because this confirms that she's a serial killer, where she's like, the best moat is good manners, filled with congeniality.
Yeah. And Grandpa's like, all right, fine, I guess I'll make some cookies. And she's like, that doesn't sound like Grandpa.
Right. Well, it just cuts the type of cookies.
Yeah, so Grandpa makes, like, they're very, like, because Grandpa is kind of British, as is Eddie Izzard, and so the cookies are, like, they're very, like, biscuits, in the British sense, but they look like jam kind of biscuits.
Well, that's when he pours a little love in himself into it.
Yeah, it's not raspberry jam, it's blood Grandpa jam. Blood.
Yeah, and I like that they're all in the shape of a D. It's like, yeah, he's a Dracula.
Yeah, definitely.
If he's not the Dracula, he's a Dracula.
So they go to meet the neighbors, taking the cookies, and they, like, the first doorbell they ring, it's like a lady who's in like a hover round wheelchair kind of thing, and she is very suspicious of them.
Right, immediately. She's like, nah, I'm not inviting you in. I know what you're about. Yeah. It's like she's dealt with this before.
She's like, you all moved into the hobo murder house.
Right.
I'm not okay with that. But then her husband, Tim, comes around the corner. And did you recognize who that is?
Oh, no. I feel bad now. No.
So her husband is John Kassir, a.k.a.
the Crypt
Keeper.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I'm a moron. Oh, well.
So it's nice to see him, like, he's mostly does voiceover stuff. You don't get to actually see him on screen often. So that was
That's why I didn't notice him immediately. Also, the last time I think I saw a picture of him, he had, like, way more hair.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a few years since Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's obviously, he, like, apologizes for his wife and is like, she's, she can be a little prickly, but she's good at heart. And Marilyn, she's like, I'm Marilyn Munster. This is my grandpa.
Which is always good.
And he's like, would you like to come in? And Grandpa's like, can you rephrase that in the form of a statement?
Well, no. First he has him eat a cookie, because that's when he's able to freeze Tim. And
yeah, because they had this, like, Grandpa and Marilyn had this sort of, like, argument, like, while he's just frozen there, because Grandpa is like, wait, because Marilyn says we just moved in, and Grandpa's like, wait, we moved in? You're gonna stay?
Right, you should leave.
And Marilyn's like, yeah, I'm staying. And he's like, no, I mean, I'll miss you, but I want you to go away.
Well, that's because he plans on starting to drink again.
Yeah, and so again, like, this is one of those parts where, like, I feel like if this show had been allowed to be a show, maybe some of these weird bits that don't quite make sense would have blanks would have filled in over time.
Yeah, well,
but since we're just kind of stuck with this one little time capsule of this show.
Yeah.
Because it seems like Marilyn's cool with that, but, like, I don't know, like, Grandpa does not seem to really want her around.
Well, it's also the idea, right, that Grandpa's like, listen, I plan on killing a lot of people, and you are people.
Yeah, that could be.
So, maybe move away for your own safety, because this grandpa actually, loves and kind of respects Marilyn, which once again leads me to believe that she's a serial killer.
Right.
But, whereas the other ones are like, oh, she's ugly. He's like, nah, you're attractive, but I will eat you. I will eat you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that ties back to, her mom, almost eating her as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so then they wake Tim back up, and, your grandpa's like, of your own free will, can you rephrase that as a statement? And he's like,
come in.
Or he says, please come in. And he's like, yes, of course, we'd be delighted. And so they follow him in.
I'm not going to lie, I really thought he was going to kill both of them there.
Yeah, it would have been absolutely in character with this grandpa and Marilyn for that to have happened.
Yep. But then we cut to the wildlife explorers.
Yeah, so we're having a troop meeting, and it's Eddie and Herman at first, and then Grandpa comes in, and it's the same gag again. This is Eddie's grandpa.
The scoutmaster reaches out to shake his hand, and Grandpa's like, "We don't do that here. I have a disease."
Yeah. And the scout leader, who I think we eventually learn his name is Steve.
Steve, yeah.
And he's like, why does Eddie's scout uniform not have his old troop numbers on it? And they're like, oh, they must have just fallen off, who knows?
Yeah, and he's like, I'm not normally a skeptical person, but this is shady shit.
What's going on? He kind of takes Herman to the side and is like, what's going on? Something's fishy here. Mm-hmm. And, they kind of fill him in. They're like, he was part of, I forget the troop number.
Pack 110. The baby bear to the baby bear pack.
Yeah. And, we're trying to keep that kind of on the lowdown because, Eddie's kind of traumatized and we don't want the other kids kind of asking him questions about it. We don't want to make a big deal out of it. And, Steve's kind of like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. I'll try to help out and everything. Yep. And then Lily strolls into the meeting looking like a goddamn runway model.
Right. Well, because Portia de Rossi.
Yeah. She's just dressed to the nines and Steve's like, who is that?
Well, and then we get
that's my mom.
Well, then we get a cutaway of Grandpa looking at both Herman and Steve, and their heartbeats skipped at the exact same time. They matched perfectly. It seems like.
That's convenient.
Yeah.
So then we get a little later, we have this Grandpa and Marilyn and Eddie are out in the woods, and they're in this weird it's like
a hunting blind.
Yeah, but it looks like it's a pile of logs, but with a cutout where a window is. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a disguised hunting blind. Mm-hmm. And
talking about the circle of life.
Yeah, and there's a deer outside, and they're explaining to Eddie the circle of life. And at first they're just deer eat the grass, and the deer die, and they fertilize the grass, and it's just a circle. And then Grandpa's like, but no, there's more to it because the deer gets eaten by the mountain lion.
Right.
The mountain lion fertilizes the grass. And that's the circle.
And by the way, the cougar just jumps out of the tree at that moment, or mountain lion, and just devours that freaking deer.
Yeah. And then Eddie's like, well, does anything eat the lion?
Nah, and I love that Grandpa just slides out of frame.
Yeah, and Marilyn's just like, Grandpa. And then you see Grandpa as a gargoyle-ass,
bat demon.
It looks like the vampire from Midnight Mass, basically. Yeah. He's very monstrous. Which again, if he looks like this, why can't Herman just have a flat head? Let him be Frankenstein.
Right.
But fine, and so he obviously swoops in, kills the mountain lion, and is covered in blood, and just looks up at Eddie and is like, "It's nature."
Right. It's amazing.
And so then we just cut to Eddie talking to Lily later, and he tells her about their whole circle of life chat. Mm-hmm. And Lily kind of sees it as maybe a gateway to talk about the baby bear. Mm-hmm. And Eddie's like, I understand, the baby bear is part of this circle. I don't hate the baby bear for doing what he was born to do. And she's like, yeah, that's a good way to look at this. Right. But then it starts to get really muddy, and she's like, Grandpa's not actually part of the circle. He's outside of the circle and sort of above the circle.
Right. And Eddie's, of course, like, Mom, are you outside or part of the circle? She's like, yep. Yeah,
she's like, I'm my father's daughter, but I try to avoid this temptation. I try to stay away from that. Mm-hmm. And Eddie's like, wow, that's tough that you got to deal with that. I'm glad I'm not like you.
Which, ow! Yeah.
Yeah, you can, and it's just like, we had that moment earlier where she was like, I'm having trouble connecting with Eddie, and I think she almost thought this was her chance, and then that just shut her down hard.
Which also not a Munsters thing. Like, they're a good family. They all work pretty well together and love each other equally. I don't... Yeah, adding the weird, like, disconnect of... adding weird family issues to the Munsters is defeating the purpose of the Munsters.
Yeah, I agree.
But then we cut to Grandpa using his quill on his iPad.
Yeah, and Herman, like, he's outside, and Herman comes out and is like, Grandpa, why are you using the neighbors as blood slaves?
Right, we have Tim painting the side of the house.
Yeah. So, yeah, he obviously doesn't approve, and he's like, also, I heard what you did with Eddie, and, like, I don't approve. Like, you should not have shown Eddie that. Like, he's not ready for it. And Grandpa is like, he's got to learn this sometime. Like, we need to expose him to this stuff and get him comfortable with this. He's a Munster, and he needs to understand that. And you need to understand that you're also a Munster, and that your heart is not going to be around much longer. You need to figure this out.
Right. And, of course, perfectly new and good hearts just don't come falling out of the sky. But Tim does.
Yeah, Tim falls off the ladder and hits the ground, So it's looking like Tim's going to be Herman's new heart.
Yeah.
But then we cut to a scene of, like, paramedics trying to revive him, and Tim's wife is outside the ambulance all upset that, like, it looks like her husband's dying.
But, of course, Grandpa's there with the emotional support of, hey, listen, you just got to deal with it. He's dead. Move on, get married, something. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, like, Grandpa's just completely heartless. He's just like, yeah, you mean, the thing about death is that it doesn't really matter. Like, You're all insignificant, and this is just going to happen. You're all going to die. Who cares? But then the paramedics actually revive Tim. He wakes up, and Grandpa's like, I cannot believe you wasted this perfectly good heart by calling an ambulance.
Right.
And Herman's, and this is very in character for Herman, that he'd be, obviously he's going to try to help somebody if he can.
Yeah, he's not just going to let him die.
Yeah. And so then we get cut to, like, later that night, there's a knock at the door, and it's Steve, the Scoutmaster.
Hey, somebody invited him over for dinner. It was Grandpa.
Yeah. So Grandpa lets him in, kind of gives him a little bit of a tour of the house, and he's like, basically asking all the, like, does anybody know you came here tonight?
Right.
And he's like, no, I just stopped in.
Will anyone care if you go missing?
Yeah. He's basically like, I don't have any family. Like, I had a wife, she's gone.
She was barren, no kids.
Yeah. So, Grandpa's like, yes, this is sounding perfect.
Yeah.
And then Grandpa, like, the way that Grandpa sort of, like, maneuvers here is pretty clever, because he's like, so I need to tell you, Herman is sick, his heart's going to be going out soon, and, like, I worry for the family. Like, I think there needs to be a strong male role model in the family, and you seem to really care about Eddie, and you seem like you maybe were kind of interested in Lily, so, like, maybe you should kind of
keep your heart open. Keep your heart open to new loved ones.
Yeah, and so, like, obviously, like, he's kind of trying to keep Steve in their orbit and thinking that, Steve thinks he's going to marry Lily and become the new dad. Whereas
and
Grandpa's thinking
spare parts.
Yeah, exactly. So then they're at dinner, and Steve's kind of talking about, he's kind of trying to do what he thinks Grandpa wants, and he starts talking about ancestry, and that there's a family tree badge, and that, you can look back at the branches that are no longer part of the tree and still, appreciate them and respect them, like, trying to, like...
Herman picks up on something weird. He's like, my tree is going to be around for a while. He's like, yes, your section of the tree will be around. And it's like, damn, okay. Are you saying you're going to make your own little section there, Steve-O? Yeah, Steve has
he's definitely, like, into the idea of being the new dad.
Mm-hmm. Well, he'll at least be part of the new dad.
Right.
Yep.
So Lily is also picking up on something weird here. So she's like, Herman, can we have a word? They step out into the other room, and she's like, why is the Scoutmaster here? What is going on?
Well, I do like the fact that they're like, Grandpa's going to eat him. Grandpa's going to eat this guy.
Yeah. And Herman is like, yeah, I need a new heart, and he seems like he might be a good fit, and Grandpa wants his blood. Mm-hmm. And Lily's like, wait, is that happening tonight at dinner? And Herman's like, I feel like I don't know is not the answer you want, but I don't really know.
Right. It's more than likely yes, but, who could say?
And she's like, I don't want that to happen in front of Eddie. Like, we need to tell Eddie that he's a werewolf soon, but we need to do it right. And we need to stop putting him in these uncomfortable situations until he's comfortable with his role in the family.
Right. Well, unfortunately, this time, Grandpa's giving off the vibes of it is dinner time. So Marilyn's kind of like, Steve, maybe you want to go. Well, she's saying she's a vegetarian, I think, at this point. And
Eddie is saying that he refuses to eat meat. He's like not gonna eat it, and Grandpa's like, you're a Munster. You're gonna eat your meat.
Right.
He gives
no
him
veggies.
It's like a fetal pig or something. Like it looks. And Eddie starts playing with it.
It's a rabbit. I hate to say.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's a small whole animal though. Mm-hmm. Eddie's like making it walk around the table, and Grandpa's like, "Stop playing with your food." And
Marilyn's like,
"I will if you will."
Right. It's like, you're challenging Grandpa, are you?
And Steve's like, "Wait, what's going on?" And Eddie's like, "My grandpa's gonna eat you."
Right. Steve's like, "No, he's not." And Grandpa's like, "Yeah, I am."
Yeah, and Marilyn's like, "Wait, that's happening tonight? Nobody told me?"
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. And as this is going on, also, like, Herman and Lily, Herman's talking about, like, he's scared about getting this new... He's like, I feel like the heart's the last part of me that's me, and, the heart is what fell in love with you and that loves this family. And I'm scared. Like, what if I get this new heart and I feel differently? Like, what if I don't love you anymore? What if I don't connect with Eddie anymore? And Lily's like, you're always going to be Herman. And if your feelings change a little bit, if your heart's a little different, you're still going to be Herman. Like, we'll figure out what that looks like. But, you got to stay around, and if it requires a new heart, then it requires a new heart.
Right. Now, that is the most Munster feeling I've gotten out of this whole show.
Yeah, I mean, like, Lily and Herman, their relationship still feels pretty close. Like, they love each other, like, pretty unconditionally. But, like, yeah, the dynamics with Eddie are not quite right. And, again, like, maybe this is, like, some sort of conflict to make the pilot feel dynamic, and that like they would fall into a more comfortable pattern that we're used to if the show had gone on.
Right.
We just never get to find it, because like we'll get to the end of this, but like some of this conflict does get resolved. So, we don't know what this would have looked like past this episode.
Right, exactly. So at this point, Herman and Lily are like, all right, let's go talk to the family and hopefully maybe save Steve if it needs to be. So they come in, they bust up the party to a degree. Marilyn tries to get Steve out ASAP. He's like, Steve, and she takes Steve to the door. It's like, Steve, you need to fucking run.
Yeah.
Well, there's a problem with that, though.
Yeah, so, like, Marilyn is, like, trying to rush. She's, like, dragging Steve out. She's like, hurry, hurry, hurry. And they get to the door, and she's like, run. But then Gargoyle Grandpa swoops down right in front of him.
He's like, oh, no, you don't. I'm hungry.
And, Marilyn is, like, trying to hold Grandpa off, and Steve's kind of, like, backing up.
Well, did you notice this? Something caused the crow's head to dip that opened up the mechanism to the basement. So I wonder if they were going to introduce a ghost.
Oh, yeah. That would be interesting.
Probably the serial killer. He's still in the house.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would have been really cool. Like, either the serial killer or one of the serial killer's victims. Either way would have been really cool.
Right, exactly. But, yeah, we've said it, Marilyn backs Steve to the entrance to the basement and down the stairs. And Steve goes for a spill. Yeah,
so he falls to his death, unfortunately, and which kind of like, because the conversation with Lily and Herman, where she was like, "Don't eat Steve," like Eddie doesn't have very many good male role models, and we should try to keep Steve around. Mm-hmm. This kind of like puts the family off the hook. So Steve is dead. We get to take Steve's heart for Herman. But we didn't actually kill Steve.
And blood for Grandpa.
Right, yes. So yeah, we see Herman finally tell Eddie that he's a werewolf. He's like, we need to have our talk. And Eddie's like, I don't want to talk about puberty anymore. I understand the whole thing. And Herman's like, no, you're a werewolf. There wasn't a baby bear.
You were the baby bear.
Yeah, and like you didn't kill any kids, but like, you hurt some kids. And like we need to start helping you to understand what you are, and so that you can control that. And Eddie's not really happy about that. Like he's like, I don't want to be a Munster.
I want to be a vegetarian.
And he's like, you can be a vegetarian
when you can.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
And the rest of it we'll figure out together as we go. And Eddie runs away. Like, he's pretty upset. Like, this is sort of the end result of the conversation he had with Lily. Like, I don't want to be this, and now you're telling me that I am. So that's upsetting.
Well, unfortunately, what happens at the very end? Herman's ticker finally gives out.
Yeah, that conversation with Eddie was too much. Like, he
love
Eddie intensely, and it breaks his heart that he's hurting his son. Mm-hmm. So his heart gives out. He falls. They're on the roof for this conversation, and he just rolls off the roof. Mm-hmm. And then we cut back to Grandpa's lab.
Well, Blue by Eiffel 65, I think, is playing.
No, isn't it? I thought it was like the "I'm a Man," the Muddy Waters song.
Oh, Blues. That's what I meant. I'm sorry. My own notes. I'm a moron. Yes, I'm a man. You're right.
Yeah, so he's like dancing to the blues, and he's like simultaneously putting the heart in Herman and also chugging blood through a straw coming out of Steve.
Right.
So Grandpa's feeling pretty good right now.
I like how, like, when Herman comes to, he looks at Grandpa, and Grandpa's like, "Hey, how's it going?"
And he's all younger now. Like, Grandpa has a lot of like old age kind of craggy kind of face makeup for most of this, and suddenly it's just Eddie Izzard in a Dracula outfit. He doesn't look Grandpa doesn't look aged anymore, so like the blood is clearly like helping there. And Herman and Lily, after Herman gets up, like, Herman and Lily are kind of trying to talk to Eddie again, comfort him, try to help him to understand that, like, this is a good thing, like, you just have to learn to understand it.
Right. And Eddie's like, well, what if I lose control? What if I actually do go out and hurt somebody? Turns out Mom and Dad have a plan for that.
Yeah, so they're like, we've got a pet that can watch over you and protect you and keep you from doing anything that you don't want to do. And Eddie's like, a dog is not going to be able to stop a werewolf from eating people.
Well, it's not a dog exactly.
So Herman whistles, and then we get to meet Spot. With Spot in the previous stuff, Spot's usually kind of hidden, so they kind of to kind of emulate that. Spot flies down, and at first he's kind of like
semi-transparent,
translucent, yeah, and then just sort of like become, so like it's a dragon that can turn invisible, basically.
Well, for our D&D nerds, let's just say a wyvern, because he has 2 legs and 2 wings, and people are pedantic about that kind of shit.
Right.
But yeah, he breathes fire.
Yeah. So yeah, like Spot like looks up at the moon and spits this big fireball at an almost full moon, or like I guess it's waxing because it was just full, right? Or no. I guess it's getting ready to become full again because they've been around for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's coming up.
Yeah. So it's like Eddie he's got this protector now, and he's gonna know what to do next time. Like werewolf time is coming probably in the next episode. He's gonna be a werewolf again, but he's got a support system now, and can maybe learn to accept who he is.
Yeah. So that's a good message we got there in the end.
Yeah,
but man, we went through some shit to get there.
Right. It's I would not put this at the top of my like favorite Munsters material. It had some promise, and if it had gone on, I bet it would have gotten to some cool stuff.
Right.
But I think that because the pilot was so inconsistent, it's pretty understandable why it did not stick around.
Well, like yeah. So another thing that we mentioned, though, I mean, there's a lot of inconsistencies with people's idea of the Munsters. We didn't have. I mean, we had a Frankenstein person, but we didn't have a Frankenstein's monster. Mm-hmm. We didn't really have
it was like as you kept saying, like the conflict within the family felt very unnatural for what we know about the Munsters. And just not only that it's a conflict, but it's specifically a conflict about their monstrousness, which is the sort of central thing that made the Munsters work, was that like they were gleefully and happily who they were all the time. Like that was why Marilyn was the odd one out, was because she wasn't a monster. And so them sort of not only like Eddie being uncomfortable, but like them being uncomfortable telling Eddie that, it just felt very unnatural.
Right. Now, anything Eddie Izzard did was perfect. I have no complaints there.
Yeah, Eddie Izzard, like 10 out of 10 as Grandpa. And really the kid that plays Eddie, like even though like
he's a good Eddie.
I think he's a really good actor. He plays Eddie well, plays this character well. Like, the tension there and him being frustrated with his parents, like he does a really good job of like playing that up well.
Right.
And Marilyn, I think, was a really interesting take on Marilyn that I would have really liked to see go places.
So, you know what? Let's divorce this from the Munsters real quick. If we could do that and just have called it something else, even like a modern take on the Munsters that aren't the Munsters, I think that would have been good. I think it probably would have caught on better.
I agree. I actually wrote that right here. It's just like because it's tied to this existing property that we all know and love. Mm-hmm. You're going to compare it to that, and you're going to find the ways that it's kind of the same thing as like every time a comic book movie comes out, and you've got the comic book nerds who are like, Batman never did that, and it's like, yeah, but we're making a movie now that's a separate thing. But I also do understand that, like, when you tie to an existing property, there's baggage that comes with that. And if this had just been like pick just some other spooky name as the family, like honestly, there's parts about this that feel more Addams Family-ish than Munsters. But yeah, you just pick a third. I mean, if the Munsters and the Addams Family can exist, we can have a third spooky family,
right? One that actually does violence. Okay, I'm here for that. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, if that had happened, one, I would have enjoyed this more because I wouldn't have been making those comparisons, and two, I think that it could have caught on better.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, probably having it on, what was it, NBC at the time did not do it any favors at all.
Yeah, NBC was like not this kind of dark at the time, so it definitely didn't have a place.
Yeah, this would definitely have been better on AMC or like HBO or something like that. Not that they could have gotten the rights to it or even wanted to have done it. Maybe even Netflix, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and Netflix probably. I don't know if they weren't. I don't think they were doing like original content at that time.
Right.
I don't think. But
I definitely don't think Shudder was a thing at the time.
Yeah,
that would have been great. Shudder, listen to us. Revive this show but call it something else.
Yeah, that would have been really, really nice. And this also, I think, was at a time when like Bryan Fuller has a pretty bad track record. Like he kind of is cursed. Like all of his stuff gets canceled.
Right.
So it's kind of not surprising, because he had Pushing Daisies and Wonderfall.
I fucking love that show.
And yeah, they were both great, and both of them like. They got a season or two each, but still didn't last too long.
Yeah.
So yeah, and he worked on Dead Like Me, which also got canceled pretty quickly. Yep. Yeah. So just not a lot of luck from Bryan Fuller. I think Hannibal, his more recent thing, is like his first thing that like stuck around a while. And that was still, I think, just because like they got a really rabid fan base that I think it got canceled a couple times, and they kept convincing people to bring it back. So,
yes.
Unfortunately, this show did not have that sort of rabid fan base to make it stick around.
Yeah, I feel like Bryan Fuller basically, he primed the tank with those other shows. And then once something like Hannibal came out and people were like, we can get some mainstream people on this, glop onto this thing, don't let it go.
Yeah. And, everything he's done has been, I've enjoyed. So, like, I think this had potential, and it's hard to look at it fairly when you just have this pilot.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it is what it is. It's still worth checking out, and especially if you can kind of separate it from the Munsters you know and love. I think there are things to appreciate about it.
Absolutely. 100%. So, we're coming to the end. Surely there can't be any more Munsters.
Yeah, so, we kind of like have been kind of hopping forward in time. We did the movie from the original cast. We did the 90s movie, and now we've done this 2000s movie. So, we're ready to get to the Rob Zombie movie, but it's still a few weeks away. So we're going to jump back to the past
and have our revenge.
Cast. Yeah, so the original cast did a second movie, The Munsters Revenge. It came out in the 80s, I believe, so it was a little bit after. They're all a little older and stuff, but it's a nice little. We'll kind of go back and catch up on the original cast before we finally get to see what Rob Zombie did with this franchise.
Yep. We still haven't seen it yet, but man, are we excited to get there, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the tons and tons of hours of Munsters related stuff we've spent here are not indicative of how much we're looking forward to this. Yeah. And also, I should say, if you didn't get enough Munsters from us just here in the main feed, we're talking about the Munsters TV show and also just some other odd Munsters ephemera all over on Patreon. So yeah, if you meet us over there, patreon.com/thefrankencast.
Speaking of the Patreon, where else can they find us? Yeah,
you can also find us at Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at The Frankencast. You can also catch us on YouTube, and you can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you in any of those platforms. Your donations at Patreon are definitely appreciated, but we'd just like to hear from you on Twitter, rates and reviews on your podcast platform.
Yeah, interaction.
Wherever you're willing to reach out to us, we're ready and willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Interaction is almost more important than let's be honest. Interaction is more important than the money because, without the interaction, there is no the money for our evil experiments.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you all for listening to us.
I think that covers it for this week.
In that case, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Thanks for listening.
I don't know if I should be switching it up like that.